so funny what like a week does to freak everybody out. All the stuff that's happening. You have a year where basically everything is going great. You're the number one team in a conference, smooth sailing. You've dealt with a lot of. Think about this: how much adversity the Miami Heat have had to deal with this year. They've had to deal with Bam Adebayo having his first major injury as a player, Jimmy Butler being in and out of the lineup, Kyle Lowry being away for the team multiple times for personal reasons, all in the face of basically being the best team in the conference all season long. Like genuine, actual adversity that they've had to face with their team and having to deal with trying to figure things out. How are you going to be able to play without Bam Adebayo? He's one of the most unique players in the league. How are you going to be able to? Oh, we'll just play this this young center that we found in the summer league. He'll start for us. He'll be grabbing double doubles up the wazoo, and we'll be fine. We'll go and beat Phoenix in Phoenix, even though nobody's beating Phoenix anywhere this year. And you'll just have all these outstanding wins. How do you figure out? How do you play without Jimmy Butler? Your heart and soul, your team energy, everything that he brings, your free throw, basically your path to getting free throws, free baskets. How do you figure it out? Tyler Hero gets a lot better and more efficient getting to the line. Bam Adebayo comes back, gets a little bit more aggressive getting to the line. Kyle Lowry uplifts the team. How are you going to do it without a point guard? Gabe Vincent stepping up in just absolute outstanding fashion. How do you get through all of this? And yet an 0-4 week is what genuinely gets everybody's attention. Like the 0-4 week is what gets everybody so crazy about where they're at right now. It's pretty wild. Like you think about it with the Miami Heat going and losing a simple game to Philadelphia, sending them into this tailspin of a week where you lose into a game with no Joel Embiid, no James Harden. We were all geeked up for it. Then you have a game against the Warriors, loses a little bit of its luster. The Warriors are going through their own thing where they're just playing terribly, and Draymond Green's calling them all out. I think probably the worst of the worst was the New York Knicks because you had a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter, and you blew that fresh off of having this big controversy where your coach and the star are fighting in the huddle against Golden State. We're all trying to decipher through things. Is this the end of Spo and Jimmy Butler? Is this a situation where Jimmy Butler is finally, his marriage is with the Heat is coming to an end? You're reading this week. It's just crazy to think. And then of course you get drubbed by Brooklyn, who everybody's saying, oh, you should avoid the 1 seed anyway, so you don't play Brooklyn. So it's just funny how the drama in the NBA is just so much juicier than the actual stuff that has cost you and the things that actually should have been bigger problems in major injuries throughout the season or absences throughout the season. And you come back, and it's funny that the healthiest that the Heat have been, the most together the Heat have been, has been the thing that has caused the most problems. And you read these stories from Ethan Skolnick, who from 5 Reasons Sports, who comes out with these tweets where it's just like, he's been doing some reporting. I'll read the tweets for you. Some reporting after speaking with multiple people inside and around the Heat organization, inside and outside the Heat organization, about the events of last week. Previously shared on our Off the Floor thread. Spoelstra and Butler have spoken frequently since the, quote, sideline incident about a number of issues on and off the floor. The conversation has been characterized by multiple sources as very productive and healthy, as the two have struggled with direct communication this season. The sideline incident, while is not something the organization wanted, was the rare time this season that the communication was clear and open. It was very open, that's for sure. The organization still strongly supports Butler, even while acknowledging he, like many stars, is difficult, has difficult moments. There have been other issues behind the scenes this season that did not involve Butler, and the team believes that it has a handle on those also. And finally, after speaking with multiple people, I don't believe that Victor Oladipo will be counted on as much in the playoffs as we had previously thought and the organization had previously thought. He's well-liked and appreciated for his work, but I expect to see more Gabe Vincent. So that's the report yesterday from Ethan Skolnick. Appreciate him for revealing all that and doing his work on that. There's some things that I find, here's the things that I find interesting about it, is that, one, that there is this struggle of direct communication between Spo and Jimmy Butler is an interesting thing. I don't find it surprising that maybe they clash heads at times. We've heard some of that too last year. Remember, Jimmy Butler's agent came out and had to, blew up Shams because there was, quote unquote, some tension between Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler. And, it was funny. Dwayne Wade talked about this yesterday on TNT where he's just like, this is a Tuesday for the Miami Heat. It's really not a big deal. He went through some of the major conflicts that he had with Spo and had through Pat Riley in the time. I think the thing that's interesting about it really is you look at a couple of things like this is like, if there is conflict or there are hard struggles or things like that, these are things that Eric Spoelstra maybe had back in the day with a Dwayne Wade. But, the incident that Dwayne was alluding to was in the 2012 finals. And Eric Spoelstra was just such a new coach back then, Not that he wasn't a good coach. He's always been a very talented coach. But you're thinking about, like, you're just trying to keep your head above water. You don't need this embarrassing exit in the second round to the Indiana Pacers right off the embarrassing exit that they had in the finals afterwards. And now he's a guy who's bona fide. Like, he's a guy who is a top 15 all-time coach. He has the absolute authority and backing of the organization, a lot of power in the organization. Eric Spoelstra was the guy who wanted Jimmy Butler here. There's reports about how much he was the advocate for getting Jimmy Butler here. He was an advocate to get Kyle Lowry here. And I just think that this has been but the thing that's interesting with this team is that you have an organization that they've dealt with this before, but they have very strong personalities in Jimmy Butler, in Kyle Lowry, and PJ Tucker, and I think also brought in with Markieff Morris. And I think that you have veterans like this, guys, we've talked about this, the guys who have won championships, to have that championship pedigree. And it's an interesting thing. Like, usually in these spots, the Heat is the credibility, right? Like, the Heat is the credibility of, we're winning, we're culture, we're all that. And you have a bunch of guys coming in here fresh off of championships, very fresh off of championships. We're like, well, we just won without the Heat culture. We've been there. We've done that. So I wonder if there's things that are happening like that. The other thing that's interesting about it where you talk about other issues behind the scenes, we know that there was a little bit of drama with Markieff Morris and the Heat as far as getting him back on the court. It was a thing that was forever where he had the medical board review and things like that, and they tried to bring him back in. And I was honestly surprised with how much they went to Markieff Morris early, and I think probably part of that coincided with the fact that Dwayne Dedmon was physically struggling. He was having some back issues, and so maybe Spo was just looking for solutions. The Oladipo thing is interesting because we were all excited about what Vic was going to bring to the table. I think in a lot of ways it was looked upon as this is going to be an automatic boost because whatever he gives you is going to be a bonus. I think it's just difficult to just drop in out of nowhere. And the one thing, and I asked Spo about this, one of the practices, they don't practice very much, so it might have been the last practice or second to last practice that they've had. Just the idea that what did they expect physically from Victor Oladipo? Like, how do they expect him to go about his play? Because this is a guy who has carried a team. He's been the face of a team. He's been an all-star. He's a great two-way player, but he hasn't physically been right in 2.5 years. And I remember them saying to some guys, they always like guys emptying the tank. And you think about a 15-minute burst to play as hard as possible. I think that's hard as a star, as a guy who's been a star, to not only pick up the pace of play, but also just be in this spot where you have to like find your rhythm, find your place on the team, be at the speed of the game, have the chemistry with your teammates, and you have to do this all in 15 minutes. 15 minutes a game, 7-minute bursts, two 7-minute bursts in a game. So I found all that very interesting with Vic, and it hasn't been a great run record-wise for the team since he's come back. I don't think that's all on Victor Oladipo, but I remember being there at Depot Day against the Rockets, and they smoked the Rockets, and it was great, and it was a party, and he had a great game, and everybody was so excited, and it reminds you a lot of the time that he left where he had that sick dunk against the Lakers. He's like, man, this is going to be great. And he just hasn't had many flashes of greatness since then. Maybe a couple pull-up jumpers every now and then, put on some sick moves, a sick reverse layup here and there. But one of the things that's been noticeable is just him getting on the same page with his teammates and having that chemistry of finding guys. That just feels like he's a step behind. And I think that some of the organization probably just got a little frustrated with it. Nothing against Victor Oladipo, but like you just don't have the time for it to happen. The time is ticking away. Maybe there'll be a spot in the playoffs at some point. You just need him, and he'll come in and flash that way without thinking about it too much. But I think that I remember back to that Rockets game and thinking about, him giving a shout out to Gabe Vincent and Max Strus for sacrificing their minutes for him. And it's interesting now we're at a point where the big switch and the big move that Eric Spoelstra went to was starting Max Strus and going with Gabe Vincent back in the rotation when he was healthy. I think those are very interesting. That the team is going back to the guys who most of the team is comfortable, the chemistry. Gabe has a very strong relationship with Bam Adebayo. He's a very, is loved by his teammates. Not that Vic isn't, but he's just been there all year. Max Strus is an interesting one. Max is a guy who's a gunner. Like, Max is not only a good shooter, but Max is an aggressive shooter. And I think one of the things that Jimmy Butler loves is having a guy next to him. We know that they have their fun little relationship where they're doing the double birds, all that. I kept that off camera for a reason. But I think I think he likes having a guy like Max Strus who's not going to be afraid of the moment, because I think Jimmy Butler is not shy about giving up the rock. And I think he referenced something with Duncan Robinson the other day. I'll play it for you here, where he was talking about they're going to need Duncan Robinson. They can do a lot of the things, but there's something about Max I think that he really digs.
Not really. We play the exact same. They both got the same role. I think Duncan still has to stay ready, because you never know. The way that this league and the way that we play, it could be any given night that it's you again. But that's the best part about this team. Like, nobody takes anything personal. Everybody's in it to win it. And it's tough. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna say that it's an easy thing to go through and an easy thing to handle it. But he's been handling it like a pro. So we're in this corner, and we're going to need him.
I think that thing is just Max's aggression. Like, he's not scared of the moment right now. We know that Duncan at some points is like this in his head. It's very visible. He wears it when he's wearing it, when he's going through his struggles. We know that back in the bubble, like, Jimmy had to have a talk with him about aggressive finding himself. I don't think you ever have to have that talk with Max Strus. And I don't think Max Strus is as good a shooter as Duncan Robinson. I don't think there's many people walking this planet that are as good a shooter as Duncan Robinson. But I think what the team wants is just a guy who is ready to go when he's given the opportunity. And I think with Max, he's willing to do that. He'll do it with a guy in his face. He'll do it necessarily when it's not the cleanest, maybe not the easiest look, the best look. He'll put up those 12 attempts that they want them to have. So those were interesting. When you talk about, they've had productive or unproductive talks about communication and what they want. I think maybe it was a case of, I don't know, I'm just speculating here, but maybe it was a case of Butler not wanting guys that he feels fits better to his chemistry, feels who plays it. Every coach has to acknowledge with their star, what do you want here? It's done with LeBron James, and it's done with other stars around the league. Who do you want around you? And it's possible that Jimmy's like, I want to start the game with Max Strus. I want Max out there. I think Max is the guy to go to. That's why he's got to talk about, Duncan's professionalism and handling it, even though he might not be hugely pleased with it. Again, I'm just speculating. I'm just kind of reading into what I saw in the press conference and why these things may be happening. But it's not surprising to see the Victor Oladipo thing. And Vic had a quote to Ira Winderman where he says, "You can't hurry love, and you can't hurry this either. So at the end of the day, I'm back playing. We got to be smart about it. You don't want to do too much too fast, whatever the case may be, but I'm going to do whatever I can with whatever I'm doing to go out there and keep playing hard." And I think I heard something on Levitard where he was reporting that some doctors don't even think that Vic is all the way back. And so it's just, I think we maybe just put the expectations too high on him. And Spo tried, look, I'll give Spo credit. Spo tried to bring in the reins on it, in that he's like, let's just be happy he's back out there. Let's be happy about this moment. And, you have a debut like he did. I think that it's I think it's interesting to see that we're now at this point where I think the experiment feels like it's over. It feels like it's over. Maybe it won't be. Maybe there'll be a series where he's needed, but it feels very much right now like it is. I think Markieff is going to be like kind of break glass in case of emergency. If a guy gets in foul trouble, you need another wing defender out there. I think we'll see Keefe a little bit. I don't know how much Vic we're going to see. I think that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. The other thing that was a lot of Heat drama that's coming out besides Skolnick, besides Levitard's reports, Windhorst, this guy, he's back out here. He's now out speculating. He's like, I wonder about the Heat's future with Jimmy Butler. I wonder about it. He was on his podcast, and he says, the Jimmy Butler, Eric Spoelstra thing, Jimmy Butler grinds on his teammates. He brings a lot to the table, but several organizations that have been like, we're ready for him to be out of here. There have been a lot of organizations where he's been ready to be out of there. There's not a long history of harmonious marriages there for Jimmy. So when I'm seeing Spoelstra say to him, and I know it's in the heat of the moment, I always knew you were crazy, I think that he's speaking from the heart there. I think that he does mean that. So I wonder not only about this season, but what is Jimmy's long-term future in Miami, especially since he's right on the edge of his age, been banged up a little bit. I wonder about that. I will say this. Look, personally, all of this stuff can change with the playoffs, good and bad. If the Heat go and have a very disappointing exit and they lose in the first round, I don't think that they will. I'm still a believer in this team. A lot of people have been gutless and want to be rats off a ship. That's how they want to be. Then if they have a bad exit, I could totally see the Heat just going in a direction where it's like, how many moves can we do to go and try and get some other big splash? Like, do we see that Spider Mitchell unhappy again yet after a blowing a 25-point lead to the Clippers? Do we try and get Bam's friend down here and do the old Wade switcheroo? Do they make the move for Bradley Beal in some way? I feel like if it's a disappointing exit, Riley's always going to go and make the moves. Does that involve trading Jimmy Butler? I'm always going to have a tough time with that, man. Like, I just think that I do think that to a degree, and people may disagree with this, whatever, but I think to a degree, Jimmy Butler has done a lot for this organization. I think that making it a destination place again, being the face of the team, people will disagree, agree. It feels like, I feel like he lives in this land where it's just like kind of like he's always on a successful team. He's always on a good team. Every team that he leaves gets worse. Now, years later, the Timberwolves are better. Now, years later, the Sixers are better. But immediate aftermath after Jimmy Butler leaving your team is typically not good. The Bulls now, after years, finally are respectable. But that immediate aftermath after Jimmy leaving is not good. And you may argue, oh, well, most teams are that way. No, but the thing is that he was looked upon as one of the reasons why they didn't get far enough. And then he gets to the Heat, gets them into the bubble, and they get 2 games within winning a championship, and that without Goran Dragic or Bam for half the series. For me, I just think that has to be looked upon with some appreciation. And I thought it was great that the Heat did give him his extension without any warning, without any pause. I just thought that he deserved it. I thought that the guy brought you to the finals. He had, I thought, an MVP caliber season last year. There's a reason we were calling him Jim VP. Maybe there were guys who were a little bit better, but he was, I think, certainly right there. And probably in another season where the Heat weren't so banged up all around, if it was a regular season and Tyler Hero maybe had a regular offseason and you can translate what Jimmy Butler did, maybe they would be a little bit better. Maybe his case would have been strong. But his individual season last year was very, very strong. This year, I think, has been the most frustrating from the standpoint of his injuries. It's just been one thing after another, nagging injuries after another. So, Windhorst is sitting there and he's wondering about, he's been banged up. Yeah, that's a fair thing. Jimmy has been banged up with a lot of different things. I don't know how attractive that makes him for other teams long term. But I think for the Heat, they have tried to be careful with him and have him, have some rest days. I think there were times where the Heat were just like, hey, we got to go. And maybe that was another part of the argument. We still don't really have the huge bomb of why these things happen, but I do think that Jimmy was playing through some things and looked like he was dogging it a little bit against a subpar team, and it cost him, bit him in the ass, and I think Spo just snapped. And then I think also was kind of using that as a moment. So I'm not into them getting rid of Jimmy Butler. I'm into Jimmy Butler having a long-term future with the Miami Heat. In fairness to the Heat and Jimmy, Jimmy's done a lot for the Heat and Heat have done a lot for Jimmy. They went out and they got him Kyle Lowry. They got his guy. He's been wanting to play with Kyle for a long time. QB1, wide receiver 1. They've been having that long pass connection and all that type of stuff. So I think the Heat have done right by him. They got him some veterans, and Bam and Jimmy, Bam and Tyler have had the growth that you would want a guy to have. Like, let's not say that they are number 1 in the East. Whether they finish number 1, this has been a very tightly bunched Eastern Conference. So whether they finish 1, 2, or 3, I think that they've proven themselves to be one of the best teams in this conference, bar none. So it's just funny. It's just funny seeing all the stuff come out this week, all because of one little sideline blowout. And yet, here they are. They spent one day out of first place with a big game in Boston. Don't get me wrong. Boston's going to be a big game tonight. It's a game with some pressure. I think because I think a lot of the attention is going to be on the Heat going into this nationally. I don't think it's going to be on Boston. I think Boston, the story there is Robert Williams being hurt, although it seems like he's going to be back for the second round if they make it there. Maybe he's not the same. I don't know. But Boston, I feel like, has been getting its flowers now for the better part of a month. It's funny that the Heat have been doing it all year with Boston having their crappy start, and now everybody's like, oh, things are falling apart for the Heat. Day out of first place. Crazy. So, but I acknowledge if they go and they get spanked by Boston, more of this stuff I think will come out. More unhappiness will probably bleed out because that's what people do when they think that there's a weak link or something going on there. So I am very interested to see what happens. I'm very interested to see what the follow-ups will be this week. But I'm getting ready for more of this stuff coming out if things don't get turned around, and if it does, it'll be interesting. If this is looked at upon as the turning point, if you will. So we'll keep an eye on it.